This just would have been inconceivable a year ago. Consider this. This is the Yahoo Finance headline. Institutions are now able to raise money for Ripple. Do you know what the topic of this specific article is?
Therefore, the SEC filed a waiver that benefits Ripple.
As you may remember, Ripple filed a joint filing with the SEC yesterday, dropping their cross appeal. However, the focus of that cross appeal was on the institutional sales of XRP, which Judge Torres said were unlawful securities transactions that were not reported in the SEC versus Ripple case. That is the purpose of the cross appeal. Ripple was therefore going to try to get it changed. Naturally, yesterday's major announcement was that Ripple and the SEC had decided to, quote, get rid of our appeals, unquote. And that's why this is so crazy. Literally the very next day. It's among the causes. The SEC literally said the following day, yeah, we're not going to sue for any more legal matters. In fact, they are actively supporting Ripple. That's how the battle over crypto has ended. This was not necessary for them to do. As you can see, a former SEC lawyer believes that the SEC may be breaking the law by providing this kind of assistance to Ripple. I'm not kidding. Folks, this is quite crazy. However, you must be floating on a cloud if you're a Ripple. Here is what peace looks like. The securities regulator made another significant ruling on August 8th, one day after the SEC versus Ripple case concluded, waiving the disqualification for the cryptocurrency company it had acquired as a result of the injunction against it. That's what I was referring to just a moment ago, people, that injunction they're mentioning. The injunction stops Ripple from engaging in those kinds of illicit securities transactions, which include institutional XRP sales. In any case, Ripple can now raise money through institutions, which was something that was cautioned against in the court's final ruling in August 2024. Let's examine the situation in more detail. The SEC filed a lawsuit against Ripple in December 2020 for allegedly raising over $1.3 billion through the sale of XRP securities that were not registered. According to Ripple, XRP is a digital currency rather than a security. Judge Torres decided in July 2023 that while Ripple's programmatic sale of XRP to regular traders did not violate securities laws, the company's sale of XRP to institutional clients does. In August 2024, Judge Torres issued a final ruling in which he fined Ripple over $125 million and ordered the company to stop breaking securities rules. Naturally, I'll take a moment to mention that the SEC and Ripple, who recently became best friends, are building bunk beds together. They each have a favorite dinosaur, a velociraptor in fact. Bonus points if you can identify the film I'm referring to without searching online or with artificial intelligence. However, Ripple and the SEC had previously reached an agreement to lower Ripple's penalties. What did they simplify it to? If I recall correctly, they agreed to reduce the amount from $125 million to about $50 million. In order to make Ripple's life simpler, they also decided to remove the injunction. But Judge Torres would have none of it. Judge Torres gave the response, absolutely not. Well, okay, we're just going to go ahead and drop the appeal, then everything's fine, Ripple said. In any case, the article goes on. The order, which forbids Ripple from collecting money through the institutional sale of XRP, is still in effect, even though both parties withdrew their appeals and the case ended on August 7th. Rule 506D of the Securities Act, which automatically forbids businesses from using specific exemptions to raise funds without registering with the SEC, disqualified Ripple after the injunction. Now that the SEC has waived the crypto firm's disqualification under Rule 506D, that's the big money location. This indicates that the agency may use the Regulation D exception to solicit money from accredited investors without being registered with the SEC. That's amazing! And it was on Friday afternoon that I first came across the news from John Deaton's Crypto Law Group. Here's what John Deaton himself said on Friday afternoon on this. This implies that Ripple can keep raising capital in the private markets. One could even argue that everything is going according to plan, as though Ripple's lawsuit and the $125 million fine had never occurred. It's absolutely true. It was nothing more than 5 years of hell and an absurd waste of money that destroyed ordinary XRP speculators. However, it seems as though it was not executed well. In other words, Ripple's overall outcome is the... Isn't it absurd that so many people were harmed and that we had to endure all of that for this to occur? For the SEC to suddenly change their mind and say, God, no, you're fine. Completely insane, completely crazy and irrational. Fred Rispoli, an attorney and member of the XRP community, posted this. He states, although I was wrong believing Judge Torres would amend the injunction, I did say at the end of the day it was irrelevant because a new, just, and smarter SEC could give Ripple whatever relief it needed. Why the SEC couldn't do that was never going to be explained. I felt validated. Yes, he was right about that. So give credit where credit is due. The SEC did it, in addition to having the ability to do so. They have completed the task, correct? This is a post by lawyer and XRP community member Bill Morgan. His words were, "Another win for Ripple." In response to the permanent injunction, the SEC issued an order waiving Ripple's bad actor disqualification. Judge Torres refused to lift the permanent injunction, which was the next best thing. Ripple will be able to raise money because of this. The prohibition on Ripple undertaking exempt securities offerings has been lifted. Additionally, it might assist Ripple in accomplishing more general business goals, such as submitting an application for a national bank charter, and that's a major one, which you can debate to what extent, but it's simply another element that is good for the whole XRP ecosystem. Therefore, it helps that, at the very least, this is all beneficial to us in some indirect way. Then came this post from Mark Faisal, a former attorney for the SEC. When questioned about this, he responded, "The legalities," citing the SEC's actions in filing this waiver. The legalities are unclear. The SEC's actions here are quite unusual and possibly questionable, much like everything else in the cryptocurrency space. But who's going to protest if it's against the law? Until investors in XRP lose their money and wonder why the SEC didn't stop it, that is. Yes, don't wait for a group of XRP holders to approach the SEC for assistance. On that one, don't hold your breath. XRP is clearly an early winner in the cryptocurrency world, but that doesn't mean it can't experience terrible setbacks. And while I do believe that an XRP bubble will burst, it will do so with the same kind of amazing upward price activity that has been observed in Bitcoin over several years. You can say whatever he wants there, and me, all right? If individuals don't know what they're doing and buy at the top of the market, I don't think XRP investors will be let down in this market cycle. Some will, but you won't see members of the XRP community who have been around for years pleading with the SEC for assistance. Not at all. It simply will not occur. Couldn't ordinary investors sue Ripple as a result of this? Added Sherry, a member of the XRP community. Then, according to Mark Faisal, I don't think they'd have standing. In what ways do Ripple sales to other people hurt them? Furthermore, even if the waiver itself could be questionable legally, it appears that Ripple would have a strong argument if the SEC had granted it one. Yes. In any case, Ripple ought to be safeguarded. He looked at the waiver order's wording and added, then there's also this. It's possibly even more lawless than I had anticipated. The SEC specifically mentions their intention to revoke the injunction, which the district judge categorically rejected. The court finds that to be a pretty obvious FU. If so, that's okay, whatever. Will someone take any action over this? In my opinion, this essentially indicates that, as Lawyer Deaton stated in the previous piece, everything is going as usual. But you enjoy seeing it, don't you? This is really amazing.